Welcome back or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Lucini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 51. My guest is Darren Lowe, USA Lacrosse Hall of Fame, former head of U.S. institutional sales for RBC Capital Markets. From Long Island to one of the best to ever play at Brown University for the pros, Darren remains one of an elite few who have achieved all-world status in both professional, sport, and business. He has an incredible ability to relate, network, and build rapport instantly and effectively. And after retiring in 2013, Darren was the recent chair of the board for the Benjamin School in Florida, 2019 to 2023. He remains an executive board member of the USA Lacrosse and is current board member for All Junior Golf Foundation. He maintains these leadership roles as well as strategic investing and giving back, all while finding the time to be a husband and a father of two boys. I'm thrilled to have Darren on here to share his story and his perspectives with our community. So Darren, thanks for making the time.
Mark, thanks for having me. Humbled to be here.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. And we just connected a few weeks ago when I heard you speak on the Premier Lacrosse League and all about financial literacy, but more about life after lacrosse. And you emphasized quite a few amount of times the importance of connections, networking, finding help, mentors, and that really resonated with me. And I wanted to know right from the jump, have you always had that kind of mentality? Did you learn that early on or not until later in your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was shown that by my father. My dad was the high school football and lacrosse coach and PE and health teacher at Manhasset High School on Long Island. A very affluent community, big Wall Street ties, people who connected in general, business-wise. Did it through social life, golf clubs, as well as in the workplace. And then, it was a big lacrosse community that he was a part of. So it fit what I could see firsthand. And, he always told me to act like I was from, Manhasset where he worked and network like that, but always play the game like I was from Mineola, which was a less affluent area, and stay hungry, all the time through the process. And, his model for my brother and I was always someone's going to leave a door open for you, kick it open when they do, and make the most of it. So, kind of living in that household and seeing it firsthand, and, you see the cars that people drive that you're not, at games when you're a kid and your dad's coaching. And, but I also saw a lot of his former players move on in the financial industry where I eventually went or wanted to go, and was able to use them as networking tools because of the familiarity they had with my dad, which was really, really a unique, process. It felt like they were paying back my father by helping me. So I guess that answers the question.
Outstanding. And I think maybe this next question also will have to deal with networking, but what came to mind as I was preparing for this podcast was the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And he refers to the importance of a great upbringing and early opportunities. And I saw that you were raised in a hotbed of lacrosse. You had family members that also competed at a very, very high level. Nevertheless, I didn't want to go without asking you the question, were there some inflection points that helped you early on? Like, what were those doors that you knocked down?
From a networking standpoint, I think you had to, one of my mottos has always been, just watch me. And so watch what I do. So in some way, if you live that motto, you kind of have to say, I think when I was a junior in high school, we beat my dad's team. It was the first time we beat my father's team in 32 years. We beat him in overtime at his place right before Mother's Day. And we played him twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year in playoffs. And, the year before we lost to him 20-4 and his 2 backup goalies scored on us. So it was quite an accomplishment. I think that may have been the confidence piece where I felt like I really belonged in the lacrosse world, which I think turned into I really belong in the world. I can accomplish something because I could relate to going back to the 12 years prior to losing 20-4 and know all the work I did in that time period in improving my process to be better. And like an environment like that arose where I had watched, I think my dad had in his coaching career at Manhasset, 32 years, had 104 high school All-Americans, or college All-Americans that came out of his high school team. So it's not like I watched bad players. I watched incredible players. And a lot of those were, mentors just by watching them that I never talked to. And I think that on that field, I got a chance to feel like I was one of them, and, gave me confidence asking the next question, and I think when you start feeling like you belong in any environment, the confidence rolls if things work for you. So an inflection point, like the hotbed of Long Island, like, the high school I went to was not a hotbed necessarily for lacrosse during the time period I was there. We had 13 kids on our team, and I remember looking over at my father's sideline, he had 60 kids on the sideline, right? So it wasn't like a massive number, but, that was, I think that heavy lifting that got done during that year made me trust my process and come out of my shell a little bit.
I have a lot of young athletes that listen to this too, whether their parents tell them to or whatnot. What really resonated me with that answer that you just gave is feeling like you belong. And I would ask you, to just take this next minute or two for a piece of advice for that young athlete, because obviously you point to that confidence piece that came from that one win your junior year, but to a young athlete, what would be your number one piece of advice there?
Prepare for success. I think, one thing that my father always stressed is win while nobody's watching. And, I believed in what I was doing to get better, and I saw steps in it. And I think that, even though you can lose 20-4, I look at that as a big point where, it was a kick in the butt to go get to work. It was either do it or not, I don't know. I was in, and I was thinking about this the other day. I was in Martin Hall's lesson lab, the top ranked golf instructor with my son, and he had a sign up on the wall that said, "Make excuses or make progress, your choice." And I think for young athletes out there are a lot of excuses made when things don't go well. Don't make those. Don't let someone else make them for you. Make progress. And like, when I saw that, I'm like, wow, that's a really simple message. But if I could talk to my younger self, I would have believed it more. And if kids are listening, I would tell them, put that up on their wall. And I would say for the parents who are listening, let your kid fail a little bit so they can work on their process.
Outstanding. I was on the phone earlier today with an elite high school student athlete that's on the precipice of going to a great D1 school, waiting for an offer, right? And my main message was get better or get better, right? And it's great. I bring it sort of mentality. And I want to transition to, Brown University. It has on the website that Darren Lowe might be the best that ever played on that field. And I thought that was remarkable. Congratulations. And I want to ask you, as you transitioned from middle school to high school and then eventually to Brown, what would you point as the tangibles or intangibles that allowed you to be successful at that level?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Brown situation, I knew I belonged there. There were kids that the group that I went to go play for Dom Starsia, legendary coach at Brown, and left for Virginia when I graduated. And he had a group of kids there that I really identified with. And I think he won Long Island the year before I went to college. So he got Jay McMahon, Andy Towers from New Canaan. He had Mike Marinelli, Craig Vacris. He had Rich Toohey. He just had a group of kids Mike Gannon from Oceanside that I identified with and I felt comfortable with right away. And so my comfort level when I got there was really, really good immediately. And we were building something that was going to be different. And I probably went in as the third or fourth best recruit in that class. By nature, I played behind the goal and I was an attackman, and you don't have a lot of assists in your career if you don't have good players to put the ball in the goal, because putting the ball in the goal is really hard. And, I had that there, with Andy, Oliver Marty, Jay. It was Rich Tui shoot lights out. And I think that for me, Dom gave me a lot of freedom, a lot of belief in me to just let me go. I tried to, it just kind of took off and fed for himself. And I think the Brown piece is like, there was one day at Brown, which I call the greatest day that I've ever had there, and the worst day. We were 13-0, number 2 in the country, had Maryland coming in the NCAA quarterfinals, a home game. They had put new stands up on the far side, and the place was packed. The lawn behind was packed, and it was at capacity, and we lost. And we lost. We just didn't play our best game. And so it was the greatest day because of what we had put the energy into that campus, being 13-0, and the city of Providence really bought into us. And I think, that's carried out. Like I always say, at Brown, it's pretty amazing. Like, there's not much going on in Providence in the spring, except for Brown lacrosse. If it's good, you're superhuman. You're on the news all the time. So it just it was a great period of time in my life, and I took advantage of everything the school had educationally for me that I didn't have growing up, and I was afraid to fail in a lot of ways.
I'm glad you finished it that way, because as I was reading, like I said, researching, preparing for this, there's a saying I like to say over hardship creates a harder and more fortified ship. So that's kind of where I want to go next. I see the championships, I see the national and all world honors, I see the academic and the prosperity. Maybe it was the 20-4 loss, maybe it was that loss against Maryland, but what was a loss that really stuck out to you in your early life that really, wow?
Well, I think one of the things I'm most proud about athletically was in 1994, I got cut from the USA team, and I was the NCAA Player of the Year in 1992. And if I would have played really well, stayed in shape, better, and it should have been a lock. And what I did was I didn't play indoor lacrosse, in the for the New York Saints because I wanted to stay healthy. I probably should have to stay sharper. So I decided to pick up that and really try to get better rider, better shooter, better all around player, better ground balls. And 4 years later, I think I made the team, in the first game. I kind of knew it. That was my time, and that disappointment was it hurt. It hurt because I grew up in a house where it was there for me. The taking was there for me, and I didn't take advantage of it. But ultimately, it led to 10 years of incredible lacrosse. And if I would have made that team, I probably would have quit playing and just gone to work. 4 years out of school, and I would have missed out on so many opportunities that I had to play, on a team with my brother, in 2002, and play with him in club when he was done, and play indoor pro with him, and then, kind of do the outdoor, the beginning of MLL showcase before there were teams, so those types of things. Like, I think that was one of those pieces where my branches would have gone in different directions, and I failed, and I kind of feel like I failed miserably, and I'm really proud I just put the work in. I was up every morning running at 5 o'clock, 2 years early for the next tryouts. I wasn't going to let it happen again.
If you'll humor me, I'd like to share a story that you provoked in my mind. There's this young boy sitting next to his dog down at the shore, and the dog's whimpering, and the neighbor next to him says, "Hey kid, what's going on with that dog?" And the kid says, "Well, I think they just renovated the deck, and they left a couple of screws and nails sitting around, and I think the dog is sitting on the nail." And the neighbor says, "Well, why doesn't the dog move then?" And the kid said, "Well, I guess it doesn't hurt enough yet." And I love that story because as I've gotten deeper into psychology, I understand a term called neuroassociative conditioning, which is a fancy word that the brain is only activated by pain or pleasure, nothing else. And you don't ramp up your life unless there's enough pleasure, like a goal that you want to go get, or there's enough pain, like getting cut like that. And I just love that you vulnerably shared that, because when you are in pain, you're up at 5 and you're like, no way that's happened to me again. Thank you for sharing that story. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, before the next question.
Mark, I'll tell you, if you were to come in my office at home, my kids laugh at me. I have are second place trophies. Anything that's, a first place or a reward or pictures in my garage when I leave, at the golf cart garage. I'm motivated by, winning is fleeting and you enjoy the process, but you win and you go through the process because you lose. You either lose a close game or you lose badly, and it's what you do about it. And, the one thing I loved about Wall Street was that there are people, if you're right 55% of the time, you're extremely successful. And that's a different mentality. And I saw that on the street, as people who were athletic just had an advantage because you don't win all the time.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? It's winners lose more than losers lose. Right. And I like that because they go for it. And I think in sport, you have baseball, right? You can be such a failure and be a Hall of Famer, right? At the home plate. I want to go into, since you brought it up, Wall Street, Lehman Brothers, JP Morgan, Bank of America, various sales and management roles. Obviously, you found success there. Anything that really jumps out as a highlight or low light during those times?
It was like going in a locker room every day and competing, and it fit me. Initially I started out on a trading desk because I thought I wanted to be a trader that took risk every day, and had the end result be my own. And I thought that fit me better for what my skill set was. But I got great advice in my career that I found that I was a better salesperson with a trader mentality, and decided to make that shift. And I felt like it was humbly taking a step back, which eventually it probably wasn't, because I might have failed in the other one and I might have given up the opportunity of success. And then in the trading side, I think, in the sales side, it allowed me to look at more than myopic trading things and math every day, and allowed me to put bigger picture stuff together and concentrate on the why. There's a great YouTube did by I think it's Dr. Sinek. It's talked about the golden circles, and he has the why and the what and the how, and the why, the how, and the what, and most people concentrate on the what, and sales taught me to concentrate on the why. And the why is how you actually sell your story. And I think an example that's used is, there were a lot of companies when Apple came out selling iPhones, and they said, we have great iPhones. The other companies say, we have great phones. They do this. This is what you get out of it. And Apple said, this is why we're doing it. We're recreating the world. And the branding of that allowed them to be successful. Just that simple thing of concentrating on the why. And, those are the types of things I found in sales that I try to trade myself to be very intellectually curious about a lot of different things. And if you're in sales, you can look at a lot of different things and then put the macro piece together and decide what's best based on the macro pieces. And rather than looking at the same math equation and saying, this bond's going to trade here today, this is the bootstrapping of the derivative, this is what the currency moves are going to be, and this is how it should be. And you look at that all day, it's repetitive. There was more things to me like, here's the political, the social economic differences of this, country. And that's kind of what I found in Wall Street. Like, the people that were really successful, and if young people are getting into that business or any business, if there's somebody really good that becomes your mentor and they get to know you, they may know what you're better at than you do, and you have to listen to it. And so, I had some good people tell me that was probably better suited for my skill set than I didn't even know I had, frankly.
I saw it, dude. I wrote it down right away, right, and said that right after locker room. I wanted to talk about how self-aware it seems, right? You have been, are, and it's finding your fit is how you used it, right? Knowing that you're more of a bigger picture person, something that in the psychology training. Initially, I don't care if it's the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, understandmyself.com. It's really important to know your personality so you can find your fit and make the most of it. I think you had that all the way back from your time on Long Island into lacrosse, into Wall Street. You found your fit every step of the way. Darren, everybody seems to know what to do, but not everybody does what they know. When I'm listening to you, I see an unwavering belief, or what I think leaders have is they have this conviction. Where did that conviction come from? Right? To just yeah, you might know what to do, but it seems like you always went for it, right? From early on, all the way through Wall Street. Why have you always went for it? Where'd you get that?
Maybe losing a lot in sports, as a kid. If I look at my high school record, and I played 4 years of varsity soccer, 3 years of varsity basketball, lacrosse for 4 years in varsity. My record was probably, 400%. Like, it wasn't like incredible. And then, you get to Brown and you got to win an Ivy championship. So you got to win 6 games, right? And you can't lose. And that there's ebbs and flows. You attack seasons differently when you look at it that way. If I would tell you, like, there was a gentleman I worked for. His name is Mark Warner. He was at J.P. Morgan when I went there. He ran a good portion of their business. He was a Penn lacrosse player. It's hard to say. He played against my father. I saw him play when he was in high school. He watched me play when I was at Brown. He's heavily involved in UPenn lacrosse. He kind of took me under his wing at an early age. And when I was sitting on the desk, he would sit next to me, even though he had a giant office in the corner. But he had a desk on the floor, and I watched him come in, and he'd rather be out there than in the office in the corner. And he was someone that, I could bounce ideas out and get confidence. And he listened to me. He was, someone in the pay scale, 5 above me, sitting near me. And what he had me do after he got to know me better was he went to Bank of America and ran all capital markets. And at the time I went over there, Bank of America wasn't that big. It was a Charlotte-based firm in New York. It's much bigger now. And we built out businesses. And he said, let's go build out businesses. You got this. And I'm like, I don't know much about that market, though, Mark. And he would say, okay, you got to understand, a vice president knows more than you do in that business. So you got to find someone you trust and, build them out. And so, like, things that I've always looked at is, we went to championship teams and asked coaches who the players were that made the difference for them being champions, not necessarily the best players. And then we hired them out of school. And we looked at it in a way of, one thing, the bouncing ideas with I call him the Colonel, Mark Warner. He's the Colonel to me. We would say, people are successful in different ways. So when we built desks, we thought about it as, take the Harvard lineman who communicates really well, put them in the middle, put them next to the tennis player from the Bollettieri or IMG Academy who's really good, from Georgetown, who, when she gets in trouble, she goes to the back of the fence, bounces the ball 3 times, takes a deep breath, and relies on no one. So we put her next to the lineman, next to the coxswain on the Penn crew team, next to a long distance runner from Johns Hopkins. On the other side, we took a lacrosse player from Yale. And then on the other side, we put, a kicker on the kicker on the Penn football team. And so, and then on the side of him was a concert cellist, and people like, well, concert cellist, she was a soloist, not part of the orchestra. So her skill set was, when people get into stressful situations, when you're building out Wall Street desks, and they're always stressful situations, how do they go about the process of coming up with a solution? And so we had these, I thought, incredible ropes where we call them, the information wouldn't stop because it stopped at the cello player, or it didn't stop at the track runner. It went past the Harvard lineman over to the coxswain on the crew team, because the information passed, and it took people out of their shells. It also told some of those people to be quiet and be more thoughtful when you need to be calm about decisions. So we tried to be very conscious about how people were successful. When we interviewed, and this is for everybody that would listen to this, we really concentrated on what someone was not good at and never put them there. And if we thought they have a weak spot, we made sure someone was next to them that was really good at it, that they could trust. And sometimes it was age, sometimes it was, seniority, sometimes it was battling. And, you just kind of sit there every day and go, does this work? And then what I kind of look back at my Wall Street careers, those businesses were done so cost efficient because we were thinking about the makeup of the individuals in there rather than what they had done historically and paying for past performance. We were allowed to reward people for future performance that happened, and then they stayed with us forever. And like that, to me, like I kind of think, Mark Warner, like, he was a genius when it came to that stuff. And those are little things that, I picked up from him. And he's still heavily involved in Penn. I think he's a trustee on their board, an advisor to Mike Murphy, who's the coach there. And he should be, because it's one of the reasons why he's a special guy.
You took about 3 or 4 questions that I want to ask you, and I'm going to pull apart. I just absolutely love what you gave there. I mean, that was just remarkable. We talk about an individual character and personality of a person. You find your way into Wall Street, and then in that answer, you start talking about culture and making up a team, and you need both, right? And I learned this recently, but the word decide comes from the Latin of to cut away. Right. And you said focusing on what they're not good at, right, rather than the thing that they are good at. Something that I've always coming back to in a team setting is communication, right? Dr. Broussard, my main mentor in the field of sports psychology, said the quality of your communications can determine the quality of your life, right? And the way you were describing the Harvard lineman and the tennis player and all of that, I guess the question I would ask you, when you do pick up that phone about the championship team and you're looking for that glue gal or glue guy, what do they all have in common, regardless of the individual sport or team sport?
No, that's a really good question, Mark. The coach gave their name immediately.
Oh,
immediately. And I'm going to go, like, you play lacrosse at Yale. I play lacrosse at Brown. Let's just say we had 50 teammates in our locker room during our 4 years playing in each of those schools. How many of those gentlemen were their high school captain? 99.99%, right? When you walked in the Yale locker room or the Brown locker room, did you know who the leader was right away? Did you know who that alpha dog was? You bet you did. That's how you know, Mark.
I wish I could ask you a question, but what do you call that? But I guess it's just you when you see it. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think you're in the. It's not greatness, but like I think I said to you once before when we were talking in the PLL players, when you're in the room of someone who can really influence you or someone you appreciate. And I think that those are the types of things that, that I know. Like when I was playing on the Team USA, right? Again, everybody was not only captain of their college, they were captain of their high school. And, but a guy like Timmy Scher or Vinny Sombrado or, Todd Rassis, was secrets. You just knew. You just knew they were different. And they weren't going to let you down on the field either. It wasn't about and they made out of it the ultimate player at that time or the best player on the field, but they were going to keep someone in line who needed to be kept in line, or, I go back to, they were the ones you just watch. You take the lead from watching them.
And I will say, going off the Seneca that you gave us with the concentric circles earlier, one of my favorite about Seneca is when he does the X and Y axis on performance and trust, right? When picking teams, trust is how their performance is off the field and performance is on the field performance. And finding that medium trust, high performer, or all the way out there is really what you're looking for. I guess I would just add the notion that it was cool for me to come to understand in psychology that we can't choose who we admire. You either admire somebody or you don't. You can't be like you just, it's kind of like that intangible consciousness that when you're around it and you see it in somebody, you just admire that about it. And it might even make you angry, but you have to respect it. Sort of mentality.
Yeah, no question. And you're not perfect on who you admire either, right? Like, I was really lucky. I wore number 12 my whole life because of Roger Staubach. He's America's quarterback. I liked what he did. And I became, my whole family is Giant fans too. So I'm a Cowboy fan. And it didn't never sound. In the 70s, my team won a lot. They would say you're just going with the favorite. But I remember my mom, there's an interview that Joe Namath and Roger Staubach did with CBS Sports, the NFL Today, was Brent Musburger and Phyllis George, who was her daughter does announcing, but she was Miss America at the time, and they were talking about how their lifestyle was outside, and Joe Namath was big with the ladies and out partying in New York and living the life, and they were like, "How are you different?" And Roger goes, "I like women just as much. I just like my wife." And my mom was like, "You can like him." And so those are little moments. Like, I liked him because I watched how he played. He was competitive. He was a leader. He's what I wanted to be. And you see different types of players. Like, I'm reading the book The Hard Hat right now because it's important, and like in part of it in the Cornell legacy. And Eamon McEnany was someone I watched growing up. Like, I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be like Vinny Sombrado. Timmy Goldstein, who went to Cornell, I wanted to be like him. And those are people like, you watch athletic. Tim Nelson played at Syracuse. I thought I could play like him. He ended up coaching at Dartmouth when I was there. And you see those people in greatness, and then you play with people and you know it too. Like Pat McCabe's amazing. Matt Panetta was amazing. You just know. And I think that at work, you kind of find, at work, I found that too. And I try to find that also, it's a little bit more delicate with the friends my wife and I choose down here, in Florida, who the friends of our kids, parents are going to be, right? You want to identify with people like that. So some of it is identifying, I don't say because I took so many micro and equity classes at work, I think you actually always fall to that, to what you feel comfortable with, but I don't know. I mean, John Keogh is someone who, I went to Brown because John Keogh played for my dad. I loved the way he played. He was my favorite high school player. He's the CEO of Chubb now. So the reason why he's the CEO of Chubb has a lot to do with what I saw when I was a 10-year-old boy. I believe that.
Yeah. And it's, winners continue to win, right? You want winners on your team. If they've done it before, they're more likely to do it again. And that's the Pareto principle, right? If you won before, you're likely to win again in the future. I don't know if it's true about Roger Staubach, but in 1963, when he did win the Heisman, I'm pretty sure he smashed it and gave a piece to each one of his teammates, which is that true? Or
it's possible because, the legend is what it is. I mean, it's possible. Like that guy, I took so much from. I tried to incorporate his game into my lacrosse. I just was a huge fan. I don't think I missed a Cowboy game. And the irony of it is, my mom in high school went to high school with Rollie Stitchway, who was the quarterback of Army during the time period that Roger Staubach played. So it was the reason why she probably didn't really want me to like him either. It just happened. But, like people like that, you just know, when you just know. I go back. I was watching Martin Hall the other day, Brad Faxon. I've seen him give lessons to kids, through our 4-All Junior Golf Foundation. He's the goat of putting. And when you watch him do it and you listen to him talk about it, he's so well-versed. It comes out so easy. He knows the mechanics, and he can actually adapt to the person he's talking to, on the spot of a dime with what they do versus what's right. And I was like, well, that's actually a great teacher, not just a great putter. And so, like, we're really...
And that's the difference right there between like memorization and the obsession, right? Because if you just memorized it, then you'd just be regurgitating it to any person that walks through there. But if you're really obsessed, then with tremendous nuance, then you're able to deliver it. I guess to put a bow on our conversation here about Roger and Hard Hat and those you admire, I really love to, and I probably say almost once a podcast, that when I came to find out, it actually came from a crisis center, addiction counseling. I learned that 3 things will lead to lasting behavioral enhancement. And that were having standards for yourself or your team, action, not just thought, having an action plan. I see that in your story. But the third one is role models, the importance of role models, and having somebody that you're always, no matter what your age is, who you're always looking up to and going to and in your inner circle. It's much harder to sustain success than just to get it, right? And when I was reading your story, that's just sustained success, Darren. So how'd you do that? What would you point to as you got deeper and deeper and deeper into your career, the ability to keep earning or keep winning?
having people around you that keep you in check, keep you humble, keep you focused. Listen, you don't choose your family, like you're born into it. And I just happen to have a great one that I looked up to. And, maybe going to my brother, but when I think about greatness, I live next to it every day. I have a 20-month-old younger brother who might be one of the best winners that's ever played the sport of lacrosse. He changed Princeton from a 1-13 team to a national championship team 2 years while he was there. And it was as much about him and probably what he did in September as it was what they did in March. And then I kind of go back to, you choose your significant other. And, my wife, Sierra, and I rely on her. I think of her as an incredible mentor, friend, role model, mother. My mom will probably listen to us, but I think she's like the best mother I've ever seen, more than I could ever imagine. And, that trust in that process and allowing rope where you want someone else to take control is really important. And I think the yin and yang of that in life is, when you're choosing your friends and your significant others, like, it's really important that they provide wings for you when you need it. Because, a lot of people spend time in financial issues, like it can be draining, in relationship issues, it could be draining. And, I think that mechanism, I've been really fortunate.
Outstanding. A lovely answer. What it provokes in my mind is there's a great TED Talk by Bob Davids. He was influenced by Bob Townsend, who started Avis Rent-A-Car. Bob Davids says Up the Organization by Bob Townsend is one of the most touted books at UPenn Business School. But Bob Davids talks about the difference between management and leadership. And I love it. What you said was inside the TED Talk for me. And it was more about if you are a leader of people, because you can't manage people, you trust them and you love them and you give them that rope. Like I think you said there, I love that, because it's bad leaders attempt to control too much, right? And it's very, very hard because you want things to go well, but finding the capacity to give rope and trust. I love that you threw that in there. And I'm happy that you brought up the support system, people in check, in relationships. How about a misconception or a myth, right? What most people would say as, yeah, that leads to high performance. But from your experience, not true.
Well, everybody makes mistakes. The biggest thing that I think you can do is unwind your mistakes as fast as possible and backtrack and admit to them. So, I think I learned that in the investing side and working on the street. Like, you just can't stay with something too long. That's going to create more anxiety, less opportunity to see the clear picture. And you need people around you who kind of will pull back and say, hey, we made a mistake. And I think that to me, I think is the biggest, if I were like to critique the world, I think the biggest mistakes or misconceptions of people is they stay with things with too much conviction when they're wrong and don't recognize it or don't reevaluate. You could be wrong and stay wrong, but you can't take your eyes off other things. So I'd say like that to me is, I would say that I didn't always give, opportunity to everybody else because I thought I knew better. Like, that's just nature. But I think that if I think about successes, is when I did, and the ones that surprised me that I'm most proud of, I guess. That misconception, I think that's the misconceptions. It's like, you got to believe completely. Well, I will tell you, there was in my notebook in college, I read this, Alfred North Whitehead was a philosopher in the 1900s in the I think the Minnesota area, I think. And he it was a quote I put in my book that I kept there for 4 years at school. I don't have it in there. Should probably put it back. It said, the goal of every great philosopher is to seek simplicity and distrust it. And there's a lot in there, but you want to seek a simple answer, but you should really be asking yourself, is it right? And is there a better way? And I've seen things in mottos at work that say, rethink it or whatever, but they all kind of come back to that kind of, seek simplicity, like try to make it as simple as possible so you can actually explain it in elevator talk within 3 minutes of the ride. But you got to actually ask yourself, do you really trust it? And because you could be sending someone the wrong way. And I like, that's, maybe that kind of stayed with me and how I thought about things.
I like the dichotomy there, because I pointed out the unwavering belief and conviction that I was feeling. And then I like how you brought up, one of the biggest things you can do is unwind that mistake and not go too far, right? And I love how you brought that up. Novak Djokovic, who just became the all-time in tennis, was pointing to mental strength as not the capacity to never fall off the rails, but when you do, get back on them as quickly as possible. So I was just in lockstep with your answer on mental fortitude. When you came on that call for the PLL set up, there was a lot of energy and veracity, and your story was shared, and you had been retired for a decade. And I said, what makes this guy tick? Well, how is he still so passionate in this and this and this? Could you point to that or elaborate on what your passions are now and what you're pouring yourself into?
Well, I just did something I'm extremely proud of. I took over, your time is limited, but I was the chair of the Benjamin School during, a COVID crisis, a change of a headmaster, and a school that was seeing dwindling enrollment. And, over a 4-year period, the tide rolled in for us, right? And, people moved to Florida, and, the tax situation, the politics, and COVID didn't hit us as bad. And, but navigating all the personalities around very, very opinionated beliefs around science that, may be true or may not be true, might be found out later, but were talked about as fact. And, how we actually navigated that with a group of people. I kind of took it as my dad was a teacher. I covered TIAA-CREF when I was working, so I paid attention to what teachers, but this is a private school, so private school is not a public school board. Very different, very influential people that go to school here with very strong opinions on different sides of the political landscape. And, since I wasn't working and wasn't doing anything for anybody here, I wasn't beholden to anybody's decision, but trying to make the decision what I thought was best with our head of school in certain situations. And I think that, I kind of feel like when you're doing that, your matriculation will be judged 5 years from now, not as you leave or while you're doing it. So the matriculation here is going to change significantly. The level of child here, the service that we're providing, the experience for the employees, the experience for the constituency. School businesses, it's not like you're buying an egg sandwich. You're a partner, but your contract can be withdrawn. So it's a really different dynamic. So they're not really a client. And I'm a client also because my children go to school. But I just found it to be absolutely fascinating process, and got to look at the lens from a cutthroat business environment to a more thoughtful business environment. And a lot of the stuff that I took from different leaders, mentors, locker rooms, basketball coach, resonated from me from high school, like things that I kind of took into the boardroom. And then things don't go well, and you kind of say, okay, this doesn't go well, and you get that there's a high stress opinion, and you deal. And again, like I had good partners in the process, and I was like, that's one of these things. Like I think when I'm 53, when I'm 60, and my youngest is graduating, at 61, I'll look at it and go, wow, like the trajectory of this place changed significantly, and no one will remember me because they shouldn't, because it's about the child. But I think the work that went in, every day and during stressful times was really cool. I just felt it. I found it rewarding. I got to interview as the chair Seth Waugh, who's the head of the PGA of America, at school in front of the whole school. And he's an extremely philanthropic guy and someone I respect. He was the former CEO of Deutsche Bank. And I saw he was a good father. And so I know him a little bit, and I got to ask him about philanthropy and how the PGA of America does it, the tour. And his response was, Darren, philanthropy is selfish. It makes you feel good. And so like some of it is, I kind of like took it as like, wow, I got to do this role. You're not paid. You just catch crap all the time. Like, no one's like, you only get a call when someone's not happy. No one's calling you and saying, good job, right? It just doesn't happen.
Right.
People think it does.
Right.
But selfishly, I take out of it, right? Like I know that what it's going to look like. I just have this view of what I think it's going to turn into, and like, the fruits of labor and where our children are going to go to schools, and the elevated stature of the Benjamin School is something I'm really proud of.
I want to ask you about the stressful nature of it, right? Because I mean, it wasn't just as the chair of Benjamin, right? That was Wall Street at two, when a lot of money is going in and out the door, and that is Team USA, all the way to we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but to the 1998 game and winning in double overtime.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of stress throughout your entire career. What about a strategy for now, the adult professional that's listening and looking to handle life storms?
So I got really good advice from a former chair of Benjamin that kind of ties it all together. You will have to tell yourself in stressful situations, you wouldn't want it to be anybody else but you. And if you know that, you'll be fine. You can handle it. And that's actually really simple, right? So you have to feel like you're prepared and you can be thoughtful. And if I think about games that were stressful, like the 98 World Championships, which is still the greatest game ever played, like, how did it happen? Like, I scored the winning goal in overtime, but Ryan Wade made the play and forever changed the outlook of winning a faceoff when we weren't winning faceoffs, and threw me a ball in the crease, and I touched it for 0.2 seconds before it went in the back of the goal. And, he did the work. I finished it for him. And like, that's kind of how I looked at it. I just, like, you got to do your job, you do your role, and you got to be prepared for it. Like, I think if you stretch and try to do too much in stressful situations, you're probably not going to win most of the time.
You're coming back to the simplicity and Alfred Norwood Whitehead, because you make it sound so simple, Darren. It's not. I think there's a lot of reps that go into that face-off and you being able to put it back in the back of the net under a second.
Yeah, I mean, I was living in Summit, New Jersey for 2 years getting ready for that. And, it's pretty amazing. I would run by, not knowing at the time, Ned Crotty's house, who was the Tewaaraton winner. And like, he lived down the street from where I was renting a place, and 4:00 in the morning out on a run, back, shower, get in my car, go to work be at my desk at 6, be home at 6:30, run more, go lift, shoot balls in the dark, and throw the ball against the wall. Like, that stuff is why I was ready. Work-wise, preparing is, reading, being educated, seeking people who know more than you do. One of our greatest presidents of all time, Abraham Lincoln, the book of Team of Rivals is significant. He put all of his political rivals in his cabinet because he didn't want there to be people outside of his cabinet speaking poorly about him, do it in front of him so he could see it before it went out. And so, great leaders have mindsets, and that answer isn't the same every time you go through a process. So, you can't just do it the same way. And I don't know, I would never consider myself a worldly kid by any stretch of the imagination. My parents they did everything they possibly could to give me as much as they could, but my children live a different life than I do, according, and they know it. And, but I was able to find that through work. And, I don't know. I think when you get playing in higher level though, Mark, you're around players like at Brown and Team USA, Team Long Island, New York Saints. You're around players that can get it done. Like, it's like, you just got to be in the common moment. Team wins more than individual, right? So,
yeah. And I will say, the more you work and you get to a higher level, you're around a network, like we started our conversation, of people who are doing the same thing. And then that may be why success breeds more success in that regard. I got one or two final questions for you. Right when we had our first conversation, you shared a documentary and an article with me for the first few minutes, which I jumped on. To those listeners, is there some book or resource or movie or that you are constantly pushing to people that you recommend to them?
So it's really interesting. Like, I think the documentary I shared with you was the Harvard Yale 29-29.
Yep.
You're a Yale alum. 29-21 Harvard wins. I recommend everybody looks at it. That group of players that were on the field that day in the 1960s, like, they're just incredible humans that have done so much in this world. And Harvard was a team the year before. Yale was ranked 16th in the country, and Harvard had won like 2 games and was down 16 points with less than 45 seconds left in the game and tied it. So tying it was a victory. They shared the Ivy League championship. But I take from a documentary like that how those gentlemen were friends and common bonds and created different businesses together and networked, and probably more than they even know. Like Rick Frisbee was on the team, picked up a fumble that turned into one of the scores. His name is on, or the family name is on the Harvard chair of the endowment for Devin Wills and Barry Byrne. And he didn't play lacrosse. He didn't play lacrosse there, but he knew he could make it a change lacrosse wise. If you talk to him, like, that fascinating guy, and how many people over the years, did he affect their life because of, giving them time? Like the second derivative of someone giving back, if you ask someone for a favor. And that's one of the things, like, people like that in that video or others, like, you'd be surprised, like, they're willing givers. Successful people are willing givers. And they don't get asked for as much as you would think they get asked. And their circles become smaller over time. So you can really leverage your impact in the second derivative nature of someone helping you if you network and you're thorough. But I can tell you, like, most people that I've met that are really successful, they have no time for people who aren't thorough or thoughtful about their requests.
Outstanding. Documentary, Harvard beats Yale 29-29. And a quote comes to mind from the great motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, who says, it's not what you get from it, but who you become by it. And, 29-29 is a tie, and your story has been filled with wins and losses, but it's all about who you're becoming along the way. And I guess I could have asked you, and you already answered it, what makes greatness? And, your answer has a lot to do with preparation, and maybe you could point out the Mark Warners and the Dom Starges, but do you have any final thoughts on that?
Greatness is pretty cool. I'm reading the book Hard Hat, and I got a chance when I was working on Wall Street. We just passed September 11th, so it's emotional. Like, Eamon McEnany was a broker at Cantor Fitzgerald who passed, and he was one of the greatest players that's ever played the game of lacrosse. And in 2000, I got to talk to him when I chose to play on the USA team rather than go play pro lacrosse, and he kind of told me he was proud of me. And I got to have a little relationship with him over time because, it's just someone you watch and it's tangent, but you see him in this book and how he affected so many people in Cornell lacrosse. And I know he affected people in Connecticut and the world he lived in, and, after lacrosse. And but his calling card initially had to have been, he's just an incredibly sick athlete who you just want to be around. And he was more than that. Because I had little side conversations where who's someone I could relate with. I'll tell you, like, I talked to Michael Earhart yesterday for an hour on the phone, and not knowing him much, just a follow-up conversation from a PLL talk that I gave. Just one of the most incredible athletes of all time. But I took away, the hour conversation, like, this guy is like, he's got all the its, he's got all the its. And he's why people want to be around him. He's why people want him on their team. He's why people want to be with him in the future. He's why he's going to be successful. And so if I could surround myself with that, if I could give that lesson to my own children, that'd be the ultimate success.
I love it. I prior to going into sport and performance psychology, I did a stint at BGC Partners and Cantor Fitzgerald, spin off of Cantor Fitzgerald. So it was a massive day, the charity day around September 11th. So that's outstanding. And I think the overarching influence and appreciation and the admiration we have for those people that have the its is my main takeaway. Yeah. Is there a question that you wish I asked?
If I follow up, like September 12th, I was one of 3 people that walked on the floor at JP Morgan in Midtown, and all the phones were ringing because there were direct lines into Cantor or anything, an office that was in one of the 2 World Trade Centers. And I knew where Eamon's number was. We didn't know how it was going, what the situation was on tolls, but my brother had been working down in the business and had dodged, people jumping from buildings. So the fact that the phones were ringing and we couldn't get them to turn off was like one thing that haunts me to this day. Like, you have an appreciation for life. And when I picked up this book to read it, The Hard Hat, and it talks about Eamon in it, I realized he was 46 years old when he passed. That he's 6 years younger than I am now. And, appreciation for life. And, you just can't take it for granted. It's, so it's worthwhile for everybody listening. Spend time with people who are going to make you better. There's a friend down here, Tom Zaccanino, tells me all the time, 1% of the people that you come across want to make you better. 99% of people want to knock you down. Got to stick with those 1%. And it's very true. Yale lacrosse player, Mark. So, I just...
There we go.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's cynical, but you got to stay positive and keep that energy flowing.
All right. And I appreciate everything. I have pages and notes here because you're able to separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of what's important and what's not. I appreciate your time. And I will say, right, I was right. Right when I heard you speak, I knew that I wanted to speak to you more. For someone who listened to this and they want to get in touch with you or they have questions, where can they go?
I think I'm on LinkedIn. They can find me. Okay, they can find me on the USA Lacrosse website too. So
awesome. Darren, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Love the conversation.
Mark, you're the best. Keep going.
All right.
Appreciate it.